Hello, everyone. Today we will continue to look at the Red Hat Certified Engineer question bank. Next, let's look at question 10, which mainly deals with generating the hosts file. This refers to what we commonly call the etc. host file. Regardless of the system, the main function of the host file is to store information. The relationship between IP addresses and host names or domain names, in essence, it's a local DNS resolution. Of course, in this question, we're simply being asked to generate a host inventory file. To be precise, this means that on each node, we need to generate the IP information and hostname information for all nodes. This way, the different nodes can communicate with each other using what? Using this one of ours. Communicating via host names, is actually more convenient, especially for communication within the same local area network. So next, let's take a look at the requirements of the question. Although the question seems to have a lot of content, the latter part is mainly just to demonstrate an example for you, showing you exactly what kind of result you need to achieve. In the end, the effect we want to achieve is exactly what's shown in the PPT. For this question, it's not that the requirements are lengthy, it's just that there's an example provided. The example below is simply to show us that as long as we can achieve this effect on all nodes, that's sufficient. When we do the final check, as long as we can see that each node contains this file, we've accomplished the goal. This is the basic situation for our 10th question. Then let's take a look at this. Specifically, question 10, what are the requirements? The first requirement is for us to download the template file from this path. Previously, we actually wrote a template ourselves, right, in earlier questions, but we wrote one ourselves, and it was just a single line with two variables. But this time, we don't need to write the template ourselves. Instead, we're asked to download the template from this path. After downloading it, of course, we can't use it directly. The question requires us to improve or complete this template. After improving the template, we can generate a host file in the correct etc. format for each inventory host. This is our basic requirement. Next, we also have requirements for the file name. In fact, for every question, the YML file name is specified in the prompt. This is actually the most important point because later on, when you need to verify your work, whether your answer is correct is actually determined by running your file to check if the result is as expected. So, you must get the file name right for every question. This is crucial. Next, let's move on to the following point. When using this template, we need to generate files on the hosts, in the dev host group. Ultimately, the required outcome is that our one etc. host file must include the standard local host entry, as well as the IP address, domain name, and host name for each managed host. Next, let's take a closer look at this result. Of course, the example below shows what our final output should look like. Here, the first two lines. To be precise, this actually counts as a single line. This line is the default. It's the same for all themes, completely identical. Starting from the next part, we have our 5 hosts, specifically the IP addresses of our 5 hosts, along with our domain names and host names, 5 parts in total. For the 5 hosts, each host is divided into 3 parts. So this is basically our situation. Ultimately, we just need to achieve this effect. Now, how do we accomplish this? First of all, everyone should note that the first line can just be written directly since it doesn't change, right? The first line stays the same, so we can just write it as is. So how do we write these IPs starting from the second line? At this point, you can see that each line, right, consists of its own IP plus the host name plus the domain name. They all correspond one-to-one. In this case, we can actually use variables to make these modifications. We use variables to make modifications. First, let's start by editing our template file. For this problem, it's actually divided into 2 parts. The first part is that we use the template file under this path to refine the final result. Then the second part is to call this template file to generate our hosts file. These are 2 steps. So first, let's look at the first step. Let's configure our hosts, or rather variables. Let's configure these variables. So how exactly do we configure them? As you can see here, there are a total of 5 IPs, right? So what is the variable for the IP? Actually, it's just IPv4, right? you can write it as address, and that's fine. But since there are 5 here, later on, we'll need to deal with something, a loop. We'll need to use a loop to go through all 5 of our nodes one by one. Write out each IP, each domain name, and each topic name. This way, you'll achieve the desired effect. Next, let's first take a look at this. How should the file template be written? The first step is that we need to download the template file. Let's download the template file first. Here, of course, the first thing we need to do is connect. Connect to our host. Our host is the Cartwheel control terminal. Once the amount is up, what's the next step? Next, we start what? We start downloading this file of ours. Where do we go? Go to http:/. Here we have a classroom, this file, this. As for the virtual machine, how should I put it? Basically, it runs through all of our exercises. Whenever we need something, like some software packages or files, we always go to this classroom to download them. It's the same here as well. Here we just download what's inside the classroom. We just need the template file. This directory should look familiar, right? Basically, we put everything in this directory. As for the template file, it's called host J2. Alright, let's download it. After downloading, you can see here that our host J2 is now here. Now that we've got it here, let's go ahead and edit its contents to see what it currently looks like. As you can see, it already has something. There are already 2 lines of default content, 2 lines by default. Of course, actually, the first line is... This is our local IP corresponds to our host name or to our domain name. It's set up like this. Next, we'll add the other 5 hosts here as well. But since there are 5 in total, writing them out one by one isn't very convenient. So what do we do here? We use variables. Here we use variables plus a loop. First, what do? We start with this. We use a for loop to list out all our hosts. Here, if we use a for loop, it would be like this. For in, followed by groups, or, which represents all our hosts. These IPs, all the host IPs. Of course, to be precise, this actually refers to all the information of the hosts. As for the IPs, we still need to retrieve them using variables. So, after we've obtained the roles for all our hosts, the next step is as follows. So here, in our case, when it comes to the template file, the way we write variables is a bit different. The main thing to remember is to add spaces before and after the variables. Here, we've written the start and end of the for loop, and in between we need to fill in the content, specifically what we want to loop through. According to the requirements, the final effect we want to achieve is like this. What effect are we supposed to achieve? That is, to be able to achieve the final IP is added. The domain name, the first is the IP, the second is the domain name, and the third is considered the host name. Yes, the host name. So here we will go through this first. At this point, we start adding. Here, the first step is to add what? Add the IP first, add the IP first. What should everyone pay attention to here? Pay attention to the issue of variables. First, pay attention to the variable issue. After and before the parentheses, or rather, in between. Yes, you can say in the middle. When we use parentheses, in the middle we need to separate everything with spaces. This represents a variable. So first, the first one is I, which means we take the variable from above, and then we use it to call something. Or to be precise, we are actually retrieving the value of this variable. The variable's value is our default. What is it? The default IPv4 address. Alright, after getting the address, that's the first step. Now the second step. What is it? It's our domain name. To be precise, it's the domain name. Of course, this can't really be called a domain name. in the strictest sense, because this actually belongs to the internal network, right? Since it's on the internal network, the domain name is basically something we create ourselves, something we make up. So here, our domain name is, let's write it down. This is the domain name, and then the last one. What's left? There's still one left. The host name. As for how to write the host name, first of all, it's the same for all three. For each of them, we first call the loop variable from above. And then we insert that loop variable into the content below. These are respectively the IP address, the domain name, and finally the host name. Okay, after we've finished writing this part, let's save it first. This is our first file. As for the main content in this first file, what is it about? It's mainly about the information inside this file. Loop. So we first loop through all our IPs, and then for each one, we substitute it into the variables below to extract the information. Since there are 5 nodes in total, we loop 5 times. Each time we loop, we obtain one piece of information, a complete set from IP to domain name to host name. So 1 entry per loop, looping 5 times in total. In the end, the final result is actually 7 lines of content. The first 2 lines are default. They're the default local entries, essentially the local IP's own resolution. Then, the 5 lines below are the ones we've added ourselves. This is our file. This is how we write our host file, or you could call it a template file. Now that we have the template file, what should we do next? First, let's save it. After saving it, what do we do with the saved content? In a moment, we'll just apply this saved content to our YML file. Next, let's take a look at this. How do we write the YML file? Of course, you can put this template file wherever you like. In the end, if you want to copy it, it really doesn't matter where you put it, because when we copy it, we can use an absolute path. It's not that you must use a relative path or that you have to put it in a specific directory. There's no such requirement. You can put it anywhere you want. If you put it locally, just place it in the current directory, right? That way, your links or commands will be a bit shorter. If you put it in another directory, the commands will just be a bit longer, but there's no real difference. Alright, next let's take a look at the specific way to write this. The playbook file. First of all, the question requires us to write something, specifically to write a host.iml file, right? Of course, as for this template file, where else can you put it? That is, we can put the template file under the directory in Ansible, that's also fine. You can put it anywhere, because right now I'm not in the secure directory yet. So after we come in, right, the template comes along with us, right? It comes together. Next, let's specifically write this host file. After opening host.yml with Vim, what are we mainly going to edit? First of all, the first thing, name, hosts, and tasks. These are the 3 most basic elements. Except for some special files, for the most part, our files consist of name, hosts, and tasks. So here, let's start by writing the name. The name can be anything you like. It's arbitrary. As long as you don't repeat it, any name is fine. Alright, now let's take a look at the hosts file. Okay, next is our hosts. Hey, small. Of course, here. Actually, there are 2 ways to write this. There are 2 formats here, because the question actually doesn't require it, right? We can see that the requirement is for the div group. Since the requirement is for the div group, for the first group here, there are actually 2 ways to write it. One is to directly write dev here, or you can also write a conditional statement. Both are fine. Now let's take a look at this. A specific example. After we finish writing the second part here, we move on to the task section. Let's start writing the specific task now. So, what is the task? Our task is to take our current template file in this directory and copy it to where? Copy it to a certain location on all nodes. Specifically, into the host file. To be precise, it's into the extra.myhost file. After copying it in, what will happen is that this action will automatically generate something. It will automatically generate our IP information, including IP addresses, domain names, and host names. That's how it works. Next, let's write it out. First, the first item is name. That is, we will use template, which is also a template. Who should I send it to? I send it to my host under ATC. Of course, it doesn't really matter if you get the name right or wrong here, because it's just a name. The key point is what comes next. First, what is the template? Where is it? It's in our current directory, right? Yes, in the current directory. However, you actually can't just write the current directory here. It's best not to do it that way. So, where have we seen the approach of directly writing a file name? We've seen it in template files. Yes, we've seen that before. It's actually very convenient to be able to write it this way when we're working with roles. But if you don't have that, it's best to use an absolute path. That way, no matter where you are, you can always ensure that your path is absolutely correct, because an absolute path is unique. Relative paths, on the other hand, will change depending on your directory. So here, to keep things more stable, right, we'll just use the absolute path directly. Of course, the absolute path isn't that long, right? It's just these 3 directories. All right. After configuring this, we have the source address. But where does the destination address go? This is actually mentioned in the problem statement, right? The problem requires us to put our main file in the myhost directory under etc. Note it's myhost, not host. If you put it in host, it will affect our host communication. Now, let's look at the destination address just for a bit. Here, the destination address is under ETC's myhost. Alright, it seems like we should be done here, right? But actually, we're not. Whether it's acceptable mainly depends on what, It depends on this. First, let's take a look at this. Right now, it's OR, correct? What are our requirements? The requirement is dev. Besides 2 methods apart from changing OR to dv here. What else can we do? Here you can add a condition, and the specific setting is right here. The condition is as follows. Inventory port host name. Now let's look at the host name here. Here, it's an equal sign, not a dash. It's a dash. After the underscore and host name, add our is group status. After writing this, now we can just press enter. Of course, you can also here, let me check group. Inventory. When our inventory is in the group, when you click on groups in EV, alright, after finishing writing here next, our file is done at this point. After finishing, how do we verify it here? Now, we can save it. That is, just save our file. And then, after saving, we can just run it using a command. Just run it with a command. Here we use /navigator. Here we add this after the dash. After navigator, we start executing. Here we use Ansible with a dash. After navigator, add run to execute host.yml. Now, let's run this and see the result. Std out, right? And here we can see that there's a bit of an error, right? Let's check where the error message is. The error message says there's a problem in the template section. What does it say here? It says our inventory host name is So first, let's take a look here. The error is actually mainly in one area. Yeah, it's mainly in one area. So what does it say here? It mentions that there's an issue with checking our inventory host name in the DVA group of our groups. Since there's an issue with the check, let's take a look. Groups.dev. Here it says line 5, column 5. Let's take a look at this issue. Column 5. Line 5, because on line 5 we have a name here which specifies the name of our task. Below that is template, which specifies the template. S2C path. Then here, for example, we can take a look under S2C home. Ost, point junior. 172 is my host. When, which is our condition here. As for the condition, here it says groups dv in. For is, it's using is here. Right, the issue here is with is. Okay, so here we just need to change is to in. Let's run it again. Alright, it ran normally without any issues. Then nodes 2, 3, 4, and 5 were all skipped, but where? The error was reported on node 1. Node 1 had an error. So, since there was an error on node 1, let's take a look at what the problem is. Okay? Here, what we're doing is it's basically editing one of our files, editing a file. So for node 1 here, there's a bit of an issue here. Let's take a look. Right now we can use Ansible with RV to check the current situation. Then, let's check our its hosts. The my hosts file. Let's take a look. It hasn't been copied over here. Let's check. Now, can we access it like this from A? I suspect there's a bit of an issue with A right now. Ping is fine. We can access it. Now, let's look at the error. It's happening at the template step, right? The template step mainly involves two pieces of information. two pieces of information, right? One is SRC, the other is dest. Here I missed the slash. Well, I forgot to add a slash. The original path should be under home, jar, grag, Ansible, hosts, G2. The host file in Ansible, let's save it. After caching, not ping, we can just run it again. Let's execute our playbook, run our playbook. As long as it's yellow, there's no problem. Here it's groups. There's an issue with the word group, a typo. Where is the word groups? Let's take a look at the content. Inside here, shall we? The group here is actually a variable that we wrote incorrectly in the loop. Here, we should use groups to loop through again. Alright, after saving, let's run it again. And after running, if there's no problem, there's still a small issue. What does it say here? It says there's a bit of a problem with default. What it's referring to should be our variable file. In the variable file here, host words is our variable. A little bit of RAnkable and a little bit of fax default. IPv4. Here, everyone should pay extra attention to the symbols. For this question, honestly, it's not really that difficult, but the main thing is there are a lot of symbols. If you get the symbols wrong, like if you use a dot instead of a dash or a dash instead of a dot, then you'll run into problems. Now let's take a look at the result. Host. Here it's host words. I added an S. After we add verse, we can proceed as normal. Can we execute it now? Alright, this time it turned yellow again. What does yellow mean? Yeah, it means it's correct. If you want to check, you can use the same command as before to take another look. That is to check the series of my host files. It's my host. The my host file under etc. Notice there's an S. Alright, here we can see that the first two lines are the default, right? Starting from the third line, 90, 13, 11, and 12 correspond to nodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 respectively. This is our setup. So this is how you write a host inventory file. The main thing to pay attention to in this question is actually the use of symbols. First, we have two files here. The second file is fine. It's the YML file that we're already quite familiar with, but the first file is relatively less common for us since it's filled with variables. In this file, we use loops and variables to do the editing. After you've finished editing, as long as the output result turns yellow, that means you've succeeded. You might ask, does green count as success? Actually, it doesn't, because green has already been filtered out by the one condition, which means nothing actually happened. So that's one of our methods. This is one way to generate the main host file. Just pay close attention to the symbols, and you'll be fine. If you need to complete the question bank, feel free to leave a comment below. You can purchase the most reliable question bank at the best price. That's all for today, everyone. Bye-bye.